Somahari leans against the mud wall of her single-room hut, her eyes dim with chronic fatigue and hunger. She is holding her newborn and supporting her toddler son, an acutely malnourished 2-year-old with the development of a child half his age. Around the corner, his 2 older siblings can be heard eating cactus fruit, the small green and red blossom found growing in the thicket surrounding this little village. These days, the prickly fruit is often the only thing to eat for Somahari and her 4 young children. "We don't have food," she says. "If we find food today, we eat. The days we don't find food, we don't eat. Sometimes we just eat cactus fruit." Today is better than usual. A distant relative brought the family 1 cassava to share. The single tuber is not much, but it's better than a diet consisting entirely of cactus fruit. Somahari is well aware of the dangers of malnutrition and the mounting odds against her little family. She is also exhausted from the recent delivery of her 2-week-old child, exhausted from breastfeeding a child that needs so much more and gets so little, exhausted from the daily struggle of raising a family alone. I'm going to pause right there. This young woman, Somahari, is a real woman. She lives with her young children in a drought-prone region of central Madagascar, and they really do subsist almost entirely on cactus fruit. Now let me tell you a little bit about another young woman. She grew up in a very comfortable home in a very wealthy country. She hated camping, sweating, and getting frizzy hair. In general, she likes things to be nice, clean, and pretty. She went to an Adventist university and had outreach programs for homeless people in the area. But she couldn't relate to their experience. Plus, poverty always made her feel a little, uncomfortable. This young woman didn't feel like feeling uncomfortable. Can you guess who this young woman is? Yes, it's me. I really did hate sweating and frizzing. In fact, I structured my life around being in cold places for this reason. Let's be honest, why do you think I went to Andrews instead of Southern? And yes, poverty always made me feel a little uncomfortable. It's why in my 4 years here at Andrews, I only went on 1 outing with the least of these ministries, a homeless outreach ministry here at Andrews. To put it simply, I always wanted security, comfort, and structured environments. I was never much of an activist or a public servant or a humanitarian. For me, life after college was about financially viable career trajectory, preferably somewhere up north where I could keep my frizzing to a minimum. So you can imagine how surprised my friends and family were when I accepted the job with ADRA last June to help run a global volunteer program, connecting mission groups to communities in need all around the world. It was quite the contrast from the other job I was offered, a competitive position with a banking software company in downtown Chicago, with a much higher starting salary. In fact, I was all ready to move to the big city and start my life of upward mobility. Now you're probably wondering what led me to choose the job at ADRA. Well, at the time, I didn't really know. It was new, it was adventurous, and a little scary. It sounded like an interesting challenge. Also, I had some family members who were pretty excited about me working for the church. And I guess maybe that spoke to me too. I originally objected to the idea of working for the church. It felt too familiar and close to home. I also feared the general conference would make me wear skirts to my ankles. They don't, by the way. But something about ADRA felt different. Here was an organization that made bold, action-oriented statements about global suffering and poverty and was actually doing something about it. Back then, I didn't exactly identify with the scope of global poverty, but still, something drew me to it. There was something about the core Christian belief on which ADRA is founded, that we, as Christians, are responsible for those who suffer. Mother Teresa said, "It's popular to talk about the poor, but not as popular to talk to the poor." Something in me liked the activism of ADRA. They talked about the poor. They go straight to the source of the poverty, and in 130 countries around the world, they actually talk to the poor. They find out what the need is, and they do something about it. I was still tempted by the money and prestige of Chicago, but as a Christian, one still putting the pieces together, I wanted to adopt the same belief that drives ADRA. So what is the source of that belief? There are so many verses in the Bible that speak towards our Christian duty. But here are just a few. I'm sure you know them well. 1 John 3:17, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Proverbs 31:8-9, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor. Or how about this popular one? Matthew 25:35-40. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Then going to verse 40, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. These verses meant something to me, and they still do. These words were blessed. Jesus actually spoke this last one during his Sermon on the Mount. So last June, I declined the offer to work in Chicago, and I moved to DC to start my new life. Now, I had reservations about joining ADRA. There are some hardcore people who work there, people who practically live out in the field with the communities affected by famine, war, drought, and other disasters. I have colleagues with masters in international studies, colleagues who speak multiple languages, colleagues who have studied the causes and effects of poverty on a global scale since, middle school. And then there was me, a recent marketing graduate who liked the idea of planning on trips and maybe going on a few. Within 2 weeks of accepting the job, I was 30 hours down the Amazon River building a school with 200 college students. I was unprepared. I was totally out of my element. And yes, I was sweating. But that trip made divinely clear to me that I had picked the right job. Sure, I could have been working in an air-conditioned office in Chicago, but I would have missed seeing God at work in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. That trip unified people for a single goal, to build a school, yes, but more than that, to show our Brazilian brothers and sisters that they're not alone, that with God, nobody is alone. For many of those families there, they've lived their whole lives without the support of their local government. When you live 30 hours by boat from anything, you tend to get overlooked. Through a series of miracles, God connected those people with the resources they needed. And God connected students from all over the world with the chance to find faith in a pretty unexpected place. The humanitarian and author Shane Claiborne says, Jesus did not seek out the rich and powerful in order to trickle down his kingdom. Rather, he joined those at the bottom, and everyone was attracted to his love for people on the margins. He invited everyone into a journey of downward mobility to become the least. Oh, that's such a good quote. It's just some really powerful stuff, especially for someone like me who has lived their life trying to be the most intelligent, the most successful, the most respected. The trip revealed to me what I had been blind to before. There is poverty everywhere. And yes, it's uncomfortable. But it belongs to all of us, and we are all responsible. These people in Brazil were not lazy, they were not unintelligent or unmotivated. They just lived on a little tributary of a massive river far from the kinds of resources that you and I take for granted. And any one of us today here could have been born on that little tributary. Before I joined ADRA, I was a little ignorant on these issues. I'm sad to say I was not alone. So many people confuse poverty for laziness, mixing it up with political agendas or just getting overwhelmed with it entirely. Let me share a story with you to explain what I mean. My program, ADRA Connections, is housed in the marketing department at ADRA, which means I work amongst content writers, media specialists, videographers, all sorts of really talented people who help promote our brand. Often, we create campaigns that go along with common global needs. Donate towards giving a gift of a goat to a family. Give a community a well for clean water, or a kitchen stove to cook meals on. All very straightforward, you would think. We have a variety of social media platforms we use to promote these campaigns: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have one colleague who oversees our social media platforms and responds to questions people might have about donating. Our donors are very active online. They like to share our campaigns, post a supportive comment or a good question. While most of our donors are very positive, loving people, every once in a while, our digital media specialists will have to moderate some conversations. It still amazes me how expressive people can get about their opinions online. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Around Christmas time, we ran a campaign to highlight some various tangible items a person could give money towards. It happened to be kitchen stoves. Let me read you some of the posts. Person 1, I commend this effort, but good food can be room temperature also and still be filling. Person 2, I know homeless people in America right now that could use one of these. Why are we not doing things like this for our own country? Person 3, responding to person 2, I think this falls precisely on your lap. Start a group in your church or community to provide for the homeless. Don't expect ADRA to do everything here as well. That's your calling to help your neighbor make your own stockpile of food and hand it out. So, there are some fighting words, but we're still keeping an eye on it. No red flags yet. But then she goes on to say this. In our city, 80% of the homeless are homeless by choice. They don't want a job or the responsibility of paying bills and other things. So for them, the street life is freedom to live off the grid, ignorantly putting them at risk when they have no survival skills to begin with. It then finishes with, have a blessed day. We in our Western mindsets make a lot of assumptions about who the poor are and what they really need. Who are the poor? The Bible says the poor will always be among us, but where are they and what do they need? Well, it's 2019, and poverty has never been easier to see. We are more connected than ever, and we have more opportunities to interact with communities we've never even heard of before. Let's go back to Somahari. You remember her. I started with her, talking and introducing her. I did so for a reason, to contrast my own comfortable life, yes, but also to introduce you to a woman who exists right now. My colleague at ADRA met her in front of her home, with her children gathered around eating cactus fruit. He interacted with her, spent time with her, learned about her life. For example, he learned that her husband had left her when times got too hard. Then she resorted to prostitution just to feed her children. That she is losing hope, but still smiles when her children play drums on old tin cans. The world is connected now. We can find people who are suffering, talk to them, learn what they need. We can, and we should. As Christians, we have that responsibility. The responsibility not only to help those in our path, but to get off the path and search for others. This is not an appeal to donate to ADRA. This is not an appeal to join an ADRA Connections trip. This is an appeal to get off the path every once in a while and look around for someone who needs you. It used to be easy to stay in your lane. It still is, if that's what you want. But we are more connected than ever, and as followers of Christ, our actions should reflect that. You know about Somahari now. She's a mother in Madagascar. But she's just one example of the billions of people worldwide who need something. And that includes people right here in Berrien Springs. That includes people here at Andrews. Maybe there's someone right now who needs something. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's a welcome home. Maybe it's just a listening ear at Andrews University. You don't need to donate to ADRA to get involved. You don't need to join me on an ADRA Connections trip to serve your community. I'm certainly not discouraging you from doing so. I'd be bad at my job if I was, but there are a million ways to get off the path and get out of your lane and to ease someone's suffering, even if it's just a little bit. I've only been with ADRA for 8 months, but in that time, I've personally seen the lives of hundreds of people changed. Of those lives, one is my own. It's not hard for me to imagine myself in an alternative universe. I graduate, I move to Chicago, I earn a big salary, I climb the ladder of success, and ignore the great need and suffering that populates the earth. To paraphrase Shane Claiborne, be careful when you climb the ladder of success. You might see Jesus on his way down. I'm no saint, and truth be told, sometimes I'd rather eat ice cream and watch Netflix than think about the suffering in the world. But I'm inspired every day by my colleagues, by all of you, and by the people that I meet in the field. Sunday, I'm getting on a flight for El Salvador, where I'm taking a group of nurses and doctors from Southern as they provide medical care and build chicken coops for families along the flood-prone coastline. This group from Southern came to us last week asking to go on an ADRA Connections trip on March 3. We had to work around the clock, but they wanted to serve, and it's our job to make sure that happens. So Sunday, I'm flying out to lead them. Honestly, it's a lot of responsibility, but I'm so very excited. I've worked hard to organize this trip, and I know the needs of the community. I have a relationship with our ADRA office in El Salvador, and I'm thrilled to bring relief to people who need it. I may not have a master's degree in international relations. I may not speak multiple languages. I may not know as much as I should about the causes and effects of poverty on a global scale. But I know this much. If I can use my skills to do something for this hurting world, then I'm blessed to do so. Yes, I'm still the same girl I was a year ago. I still sing Disney songs. I still love cities. I enjoy clean clothes and taking the time to style my hair. And yes, if I had the choice between frizzy hair and not frizzy hair, I would pick not frizzy every single time. But something big has changed. I've seen that there is suffering in the world, and I've seen that we can do something to fix it. As an organization, ADRA does that. As a university, Andrews teaches it. And as a church, we are believers in it. But ADRA, Andrews, and the church, those are all just made up of people who care. Are you one of those people?